Today, I'm cutting through the confusion about overtime pay. Whether you're an employee trying to understand your rights or an employer looking to stay compliant, this episode will break down exactly when overtime must be paid and what the law really says. Stay for today's episode to learn more.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Welcome to this quick tips episode of Biz Help for You. I'm Candy Messer, and in 10 minutes or less, I tackle one business question to help you make smarter decisions because I want to see you succeed and truly enjoy running your business. So let's get into the topic. Firstly, what is overtime? Overtime refers to additional compensation owed to non-exempt employees who work more than 40 hours in a work week. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, employers are required to pay time and a half. That would be 1.5 times the employee's regular rate of pay for any hours worked over the 40-hour threshold. So if your employee makes $20 an hour, any time over 40 hours must be paid at $30 per hour. Note, some states have guidelines that are more stringent than federal law, and I'll get to that in a moment. You also need to know what counts as a work week. A work week doesn't have to align with the calendar week. It's defined as any fixed and recurring 7-day, 168-hour period. For example, your work week could run from Monday to Sunday or Wednesday to Tuesday. The key is that it's consistent. Something to note is that you can't change the work week to avoid paying overtime. Now, a crucial distinction that you need to be aware of is not all employees are entitled to overtime pay. The FLSA classifies employees as either exempt or non-exempt. Non-exempt employees must be paid overtime for hours worked over 40 in a week. Exempt employees are not entitled to overtime pay, but this classification is based on strict federal criteria, not a job title alone. To qualify as exempt, an employee generally must be paid on a salary basis and earn at least $684 per week as of the current federal standards and perform executive, administrative, or professional job duties as defined by the Department of Labor. Just because someone is paid a salary or called a manager doesn't automatically make them exempt. Misclassification is a common and expensive mistake. I did talk about this in a recent episode entitled Payroll FAQs, Avoid Mistakes and Master the Basics of Paying Your Team. Be sure to tune into this episode as well to learn more on this topic. I'll put a link of the episode in the show notes. Let me now share a few common pitfalls you'll want to avoid when it comes to determining if your employee is entitled to overtime compensation. One mistake is not tracking hours properly. Even salaried, non-exempt employees must have their hours tracked for overtime purposes. Be sure you have an effective means for tracking the hours your employee works each day. Also, assuming overtime can be waived could cause issues. Employees can't legally waive their right to overtime. Even if they agree to it verbally or in writing, it's not enforceable under federal law. So make sure you're following guidelines and not assuming it's okay to waive it just because you and your employee talked about it. This means you can't offer comp time in lieu of overtime. Be sure that you properly pay your staff for actual hours worked and compensate them for anything considered overtime. Another thing to avoid would be averaging hours over 2 weeks. You might assume that if you pay every 2 weeks, that you look at the total hours in the period to see if overtime must be paid. But the FLSA requires overtime to be calculated weekly. So if your employee missed work one day and adds hours into the following week to make up for it, don't assume that because the total is 80 hours or less for the 2 weeks, that no overtime is due. Unless you have a make-up time policy and the request was approved before additional hours were worked, any over the 40 in a week must still be compensated at the premium rate for those extra hours. Lastly, failing to include bonuses or commissions in your calculations. Some bonuses and commissions must be included when calculating overtime. The regular rate of pay isn't just the hourly wage. Non-discretionary bonuses, like those for meeting performance goals, and commissions often must be included when determining the overtime rate. If you leave them out, you could underpay employees and face compliance issues. Discretionary bonuses, such as unexpected gifts or one-time rewards not tied to performance, are typically excluded. However, it's always best to review the specifics to meet legal requirements. When deciding how or when to pay an employee overtime, keep in mind that state laws may differ. It's important to note that state laws can be more generous than federal rules. For example, Alaska, California, and Nevada require overtime pay not just after 40 hours per week, but also after 8 hours in a single day in most cases. California also requires overtime on the 7th consecutive workday, even if they haven't hit the 40 hours per week threshold. A few exceptions include personal attendants in California working in the home may work up to 9 hours per day and 45 per week before overtime applies. And in Nevada, if employees earn at least 1.5 times the minimum wage, overtime does not need to be paid. Alaska has many exceptions, so be sure to check the guidelines if employing someone in that state. Many exceptions are based on the industry, such as working in agriculture. Colorado requires overtime after 12 hours worked in a day, and Oregon requires overtime after 10 hours a day for employees in manufacturing companies. And some states mandate double time after 12 hours or more. Always check with your state labor department or a qualified HR consultant to ensure you're compliant locally, not just federally. Additionally, knowing your employees' rights is also important. As a business owner, it's important to understand what rights your employees have when it comes to overtime pay, because protecting their rights also protects your business. Your employees have the right to inquire about or request overtime pay without fear of retaliation. Federal law prohibits any negative consequences for speaking up or filing a complaint. If an employee believes they've been misclassified, they can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Labor or with your state's labor board. For example, if labeled exempt when they should be non-exempt, or an independent contractor rather than an employee. If they feel they're being denied proper pay, they have the right to file a complaint without being reprimanded. Employees can and often do keep their own records of hours. This could include time cards, emails, schedules, and pay stubs. If there's ever a wage dispute, these records could be used as evidence. Your records as a business owner need to be solid and accurately recorded. It's critical to stay proactive, ensure proper classification, and document hours correctly. Doing things the right way not only keeps you in compliance, but it also builds trust and loyalty with your team. Understanding and following overtime laws is about creating a fair, respectful, and legally sound workplace. When you know the rules and apply them correctly, you protect your business, support your team, and build a foundation for long-term success. Thanks for tuning in to this quick tip episode of Biz Help for You. I hope it gave you fresh insight to understanding overtime and how to handle it properly. If you have a question you'd love to hear covered, send me a message at media@abandp.com. If you find this topic helpful, would you leave a review and share it with others? And if you'd like to financially support the show, a link is in the show notes. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.